Welcome to ZMS Esports Studio, where you are joined by your host, me, Mark, as I guide you through the latest installment of the React e-cycling racing series. Speaking of, where are we racing today? Well, we are taking on the Amstel stage for stage 3, based on the Amstel Gold Loop in the Netherlands. So that's going to be 15.5 kilometers for the course, 2 laps making a 31 kilometer total with a hell of a lot of climbing, as you can see, 342 meters. I'm sure that's going to separate the week from the chaff. But where do we stand with our current league table? Well, let's take a look. So as you can see, we currently have the top 3 being Keith Eich, Tony Lake in second place, and BW Happ in place 3. And you can see that OTRE Racing is the top team at the moment. But let's see what happens in this current race and see what this does to that league table as we continue through this React e-cycling racing series. So why don't we jump on over to the course and see how riders are getting warmed up. So you can see everyone here on the starting line, and you can even see that Wahoo RGT, which is where we are today for this race, even has the Say No to War jerseys in support of Ukraine. And we do have our current top 10 on the right hand side of the screen here, which will update live as we're going through the race. And we'll get to see some live metrics from riders as well. And I'm loving the nice graphical touches here from Wahoo RGT, such as those stamps on the road, similar to what you would see on the Tour de France and on various versions of tours around the world. So we're under 20 seconds now from going live. And we're off. So we're starting to see that pack string out already, getting some big bursts, big surge off the front. And you can see some insane watts per kilo coming up, some breaking 6. Certainly riders that I wouldn't want to go up against. So we got Keith H. I believe that's how I pronounce that, and I'm sorry if I do mispronounce any names here. Taking a very comfortable push off the front, but we can start to see the pelotons behind him regrouping and really starting to chase in. You can see riders are beginning to choose their positioning in the lane, in the road, and that can be done via the steering through the Wahoo RGT steering app that can be downloaded separately. With a mount to your handlebar for your phone, that makes the steering really easy through the gyroscope of your smartphone. So we got Jay Sabat, who has taken the lead off the front for the UK. Pushing pretty good power there. We're starting to see the power from everybody evening out to presumably somewhere around their 1 hour threshold level. A very good burst from Jay Summit, being able to hold somewhat of a distance for now. But the question is, how much of this is the gravitational benefit of going downhill right now, and how much of this will even out into the climbs? Fantastic helicopter shot there, provided by the Vision Mixing Maestro that is Damon of ZMS Livestream. 2 UK contenders here at the tip of the spear, if you will. the lead of the race. So we've got P. Austin and Jay Sammet. And we can see Jay Sammet there, knowing that he's got that chase being put to him. That we're seeing him peak at around about 5 watts per kilo, which dependent on his weight, that can either be a very impressive number or perhaps just the top of his threshold. So we've got a whole chase peloton here, well, kind of spread out, so a little bit more like an echelon, but we are seeing that group chasing and beginning to gain that ground back. Again, as I was saying before, the climbs can really make a difference. I presume the sole majority of riders here today, our race contenders, if you will, are on the direct drive smart trainers, which means that they are contending with the actual ERG, or at least trainer resistance of the actual climb, the elevation profile, if you will. And you can see the pedaling beginning to even out and slow out. A peak in power, which is representative of that effort against chain resistance and chain tension going uphill. And we've got Anthony Dubray for France, who is taking the lead right now, but Jay Sammet, as a very consummate, very powerful rider, is not going to let go of that lead position easily. Just about cresting 2 kilometers into our, 3 kilometers into our 31 kilometer race today. With almost 4 minutes total, which is showing you the kind of speed that is being achieved today. And we're starting to see an attack peloton, attack group forming right on the front here, which is beginning to show you how those climbs can really even out riders. And coming in at second place, we have Kopse, who I believe is from Slovakia. So beginning to see some switching, some chopping and changing for those lead positions. And a solid chase here from M. Daniel from Brazil, looking to really close down that gap. Doing a pretty good threshold effort. Assuming that's around threshold or close to threshold. P. Austin, who was right on the front before, is now in this chase group, but I'm sure he's going to have no trouble at all closing that. I mean, look at that power he's putting into his chase effort. And that is Peter Austin there from the UK. There we go, he's getting that burst out as he's beginning to get into this, evening out into a downhill from that quite aggressive climb that we just ascended. We've got Keith H as well, who's also playing catch up from OTR, but if the results from the previous race are anything to go by, we should be watching closely to Keith H, as I'm sure he's going to eat that gap up with no worries whatsoever. We've got D Miller here from the UK, also giving a very impressive almost 4 watts per kilo chase and letting that freewheel just allow him to recover in this downhill, which is obviously a great tactic to use, and one that lets you recover that heart rate, lets you get back into the VO2 if you hit shallow breaths, and lets you just get back into a place where you can really go great guns through those crank arms. So we've got a good chase group here. I'm sure all relying on each other's drafts, which is also a great tactic to use. The draft benefit obviously being what can allow you to get more effort for less, more output for less effort. So we've got G Jackson here, another OTR rider, who's looking at closing that gap up. We've got Copsey on the front, we've got Anthony Debray, we've got J Samet and W Claus. Igor Copsey, that was the first name I was looking for there. Igor Copsey, a former pro who is taking the lead here with a very consistent between 4.5 and 5 watts per kilo. A very, very impressive power level. We've got Jan Linden, or maybe Jan Linden, who is beginning to close that gap, beginning to eat away at that tarmac distance between the two, getting up to that kind of attack peloton, if you will, at the front. Very impressive effort there, hitting about 5.5 watts per kilo as a surge. But he's going to need to find a place where he can comfortably hold his place with that attack peloton, considering the sheer effort that Igor Copsey can put out when he's at his top end. So beginning to see some jostling around for that lead position in this attack peloton. However, everyone looks very consistent and knows where they need to be to hold. So I'm pretty sure we're going to see all of the contenders for these top 3 spots right here where we are now, but we're also going to see some of those big powered players who are playing catch up close that gap. So right now it truly is anybody's game. Look at this, a lot of consistency. There's also a lot of peaks and a lot of the drops in those watts per kilo though. So we're seeing a lot of attempts to surge by the riders in this attack peloton and surge for maybe a brief few seconds and dropping back. They're looking at giving spikes to get ahead and then look at conserving and get back into working recovery. So we've got really professional pros, but I'm wondering if we're going to see somebody kind of cook themselves by going a bit too hard way before we get to the finish line sprint. You can see the saving of watts there on the left hand side. That shows the draft benefit that is being used by the player that we are following right now. And so that gives an actual metric to what the draft benefit is based on real world physics. So Keith H playing a pretty strong effort at catch up here, holding fairly consistent to W Claus ahead of him. So we're going to see that gap begin to close up and perhaps see Keith H come back into contention with that attack peloton right on the front there. And Daniel pushing ahead. We've got Tony Lake as well, also with the OTR team. Looking at really sticking together. I think each rider knowing that they're beneficial to each other, keeping the draft benefit, perhaps even working together here. Maybe that O for Daniel, not entirely sure, but that might also mean OTR. So maybe they are working as a team here, taking turns being the one pulling on the front, and then taking turns being the ones getting the benefit from the draft benefit. We've got D Miller here also catching up. So we've got a few pelotons working as chase groups, working as chase teams, looking at catching up, eating those gaps. And so we've got Stephen Bellio here, also with OTR, working closely with some other teammates here from OTR, gaining that draft benefit, and one would assume swapping out place on the front again, which again, a fantastic tactic. If you're not the most powerful of rider, you can keep swapping with the one on the front to really kind of maximize what you can push out to really gain ground against your competitors. We've got Mikhail, I presume that would be pronounced Mikhail, Delagote from France here, putting in quite an impressive effort here. So we've got him using a tactic where it seems to be, from the animation of his avatar, lower cadence but higher tension gear. So really pushing for power more than anything. So again, seeing another surge here from W Claws, 5.6 watts per kilo, and he has a very impressive threshold because that's only going red when he's hitting above 5.6 watts per kilo, so an incredibly powerful rider. If his baseline is close to that, then wow, I would not want to be going up against W Claws there from Belgium. Beginning to hold a bit of a lead in the climb, so W Claws quite clearly a very powerful climber. And Keith H is also breaking away on the chase group on the climb as well, which shows you something about Keith H and probably why he's so far ahead in the league table. Powerful climbers also make powerful endurance riders, so you can hold power for a long time, hold power at a good level, then of course you're going to be quite well equipped to push ahead. And not just that, to hold your place ahead too, of course. So 4.2% gradient, which quite deceptive. It's not that high of a number, but when you're in high tension gears for a road race, it can be quite a nasty sting when you're looking at holding power and perhaps even gaining ground against your fellow riders. So one does not envy where these top contenders are in this climb right now. Keith H really breaking away in this climb, really looking at using the climb and his position as a powerful climber to really close that gap, really gaining ground for Team OTR. But this is the point where we're beginning to crest out, beginning to get close to getting to flat and then into the downhill. And it's that downhill advantage where riders have really put too much maybe through their glutes, through their quads, that they can't maintain that high cadence for coming downhill and for maybe gearing up to maintain chain tension for coming downhill. That we'll begin to see other riders maybe surge ahead, or maybe just even rely on freewheeling or coasting to just maintain speed. So almost 11 kilometers in, getting close to the end of our first lap. And now we're getting to the 2%, beginning to even out and getting into that downhill. Everyone looking at maxing out their power as they crest the top of the hill. So we've got Anthony Dubray on the front here, but that gap is just being eaten by Igor Kopse, Jay Summit and W Claws. Here we go, into that downhill now. W Claws managing to maintain, just about getting into a steep enough downhill gradient that we would then have perhaps a constant freewheel. So riders will be looking at getting into perhaps even their highest tension gear to be able to pedal without being spun out. Of course, the trick in the real world, if you still want to pedal, is to dampen your brakes and find that sweet spot where you can still pedal. Can be a little bit dangerous if you get a bit of a wobble going. So M. Daniel here really pushing ahead on his chase effort and taking fellow teammate Tony Lake with him. Very closely bunched, really maximizing that draft benefit, and again I assume taking turns pulling. Keith H as well, continuing to press ahead. So really, again, pushing the power numbers over the crest of that hill so that you can maintain the speed for the downhill. Fantastic effort there from Keith H. Still some ground to make up, but it's beginning to close. And that working heart rate is very impressive. 137 for 3.6 watts per kilo. So we truly are looking at top-end athletes today. So Gordon Jackson here for the UK with fellow Brit Welshman D Jones beside him there, and they're really pushing ahead. That OTR team really kind of making a team left at a pace line to get full draft benefit, really kind of coming into their own right here and really kind of beginning to close that ground as well. And Stephen Bellio also with OTR, beginning to drift out a bit across the road here. I think perhaps with the corner here and then looking maybe to reform a pace line for full draft benefit and pulling as a team as they get back into a straight perhaps. So great tactics from everyone on Team OTR today. And BW Hab for the United States in his Team USA cycling kit. That's another great thing about Wahoo RGT, is there are official Olympic jersey kits that you can dress your avatar in. I know that for my avatar it's in Cycling Canada Cyclisme, which is the bilingual name for Cycling Canada, the team behind Team Canada's cycling team. We've got Benoit Chatelier for France. We have Mikhail, I think that's how you pronounce Michael in French, Delagote. Nice surges through those corners, pedaling out of those corners, giving us some good power to really chase. And S. Lavelle, Sean Lavelle, or Lavelle, I guess. Sorry, I thought that was another French rider. Sean Lavelle, making a good effort to chase in 19th position right now. And M. Lightfoot in that anti-war jersey, selectable for your avatar in Wahoo RGT Mark Lightfoot. Holding fairly consistent, good power, again going for the low cadence but high tension method. And Julien Nix from France, putting in a good effort there. You can see him going into the amber, so just a little bit above threshold, a small percentile over threshold. But what is that gap looking like between Igor Kopse and Keith H? So we've got Igor Kopse, we've got Anthony Dubré on the front here. W Claws holding very strong on the front. But I know that Keith was whittling away at that gap that had formed between this attack peloton and himself. So he's about 175 meters behind. He's beginning to eat away at that still. I think what Keith really needs is another climb. That's when he's going to really eat that distance again. He's managing to hold it consistent, which means he isn't losing ground, but it's not quite being eaten up as impressively as it was before. But he's close enough that he could really do some damage here to this attack peloton. So just around about halfway through the race today. And that attack peloton is staying very consistent. Able to do small surges and then somewhat larger periods of time of maintaining that effort at a kind of somewhat recovery rate just beneath their respective thresholds. Crossing that finish line to end lap 1. Igor Kopse putting in a bit of a push now to assert his place going in to lap 2, doing so on a straight as well. Really looking at doing a big sprint, but not even above threshold yet for himself, as we've not seen his numbers go into the red just yet. Green, he's at threshold here. Now this group is really bunching up, knowing that they're in this second lap now. I think looking to get enough power in, knowing that that downhill is coming. Get that power in before it crests into a downhill, and then they can just maintain speed going through. So they're looking to have themselves as contenders just really push ahead and be in place to maintain speed. Perhaps just using freewheeling and coasting, if you will, to maintain speed before that downhill crests back out into a flat and potentially a climb again. So we've got Keith here, dropped back a little bit, but again, perhaps waiting for a climb to really assert his surge forward. It could also be that in chasing, Keith may have accidentally cooked himself a bit, perhaps going over VO2 and into shallow breaths, or perhaps just having got a bit too warm, being as riders today will be riding indoors, of course. Good speed through this gentle downhill. Not too much of a distance having been opened up on that downhill. So Keith is still in a good place to really surge on the next climb. Espelio here is taking the lead of this OTR chase group. Taking his time on the front, allowing his fellow contenders to perhaps recover a little bit so that they're ready for their time on the front. Great tactics there with that pace line with that particular team from OTR. W Claws, Igor Kopse. They're switching between first and second. maintaining fairly equal power and speed. Jay Samet, perhaps a little bit cooked from that effort, is beginning to drop back a little bit. Still in very good place for fourth at the moment. Let's see what he can open up as we get through this climb. And this is the particularly nasty climb, that 9%, which again, in a race, that's a nasty climb anyway. But as you get into those high tension gears and really pushing through the crank arms for a road race, that's really going to sting in those quads for sure, even right through into the calves, and perhaps even get a bit of a hot spot in your feet with your clipless pedals. Igor Kopse there really showing his power as a climber as well. Really opening up a bit of a lead here as we crest out into a flat. With Anthony Dubray and W. Claus beginning to drop back a bit, but let's see what happens as we get into that downhill and we begin to see the speed just be kind of maintained going through that gravitational benefit. As we're in the flat, that gap is beginning to close up. Anthony Dubray trying to sprint here, trying to push beyond W. Claus, Wouter Claus, Vuta Claus. I'm terribly sorry, I just do not have the comprehension of Dutch pronunciations, and I apologize for that. So this OTR group beginning to really get to the crest of that quite nasty climb. Tony Lake there really pushing ahead in that particular little pace line of the OTR cycling team. And you can even see some of the custom OTR jerseys. Something that is quite nice about Wahoo RGT is that teams can work with the team behind Wahoo RGT to come up with customizable in-game kits for teams. Just over 11 kilometers remaining, and we can see here this chase group beginning to gain ground on that climb. But Igor Kopse now firmly into that downhill, maintaining very good speed and beginning to open up the gap, beginning to open up a sizable lead. A very impressive breakaway here from Igor. And also coming into the downhill, also getting really good speeds, we've got Anthony Dubray and W. Claus. Anthony there putting in a bit of a sprint, a bit of a surge to push ahead. And beginning to eat at that lead. That was over 200 meters before. Anthony has got that down to under 180 meters. So there is a chance here to really gain that ground back. Beginning to open up again, that gap. Igor knowing that he's going to have to maintain for a while now if he wants to hold this. So I'm sure he's really looking at being over threshold, which we can see there by the yellow meter, showing that he is above the green of being at his FTP. And really looking at maintaining that push ahead. We got Keith H here, and dropped back quite a bit unfortunately, but we're getting into climb the big climbing sections of this course. So he might be able to make up some distance, but still nothing to be sniffed at. Top 5. Seeing some good consistency on that power. Perhaps Keith is even mentally in the place where he is looking just at maintaining 5th place, which is a great and very optimistic way to look at it. It's also a great way to focus yourself and focus that energy. Because if you push too hard and try and cook yourself, well, you're not going to do very well even at maintaining your current place. Esbelio here, pushing ahead, taking his turn on the front for this chase group for OTR. A wonderful pace line, just holding front wheel to rear wheel all the way down. Really pushing over threshold there to gain ground for the team. And now they're beginning to switch, it looks. There we go. Fantastic effort, Esbelio, as D. Miller comes in to take his turn on the front. That's textbook pace line. Fantastic stuff. D. Miller taking his turn, being over threshold and pushing to gain ground for the team. B. Hap really pushing ahead there to gain ground. Looking like he's fallen back a bit. And Mikhail Delagote beginning to push through this quite nasty climb that we just saw as well. So beginning to see a stringing out of the team. Igor Kopse here, again maintaining above threshold. He's got a while to maintain this for yet. Just over 8 kilometers left with some climbs coming up. So I'm wondering if we're going to see Igor perhaps cook himself in one of these climbs while trying to maintain the very sizable breakaway that he has established. But that ground is being eaten back up again by W. Claus and Anthony Dubray. Beginning to see those power numbers spike, going into a gentle climb, but again in high tension gears, a climb nonetheless. And one of the OTR chase pelotons here, chase pace line, with M. Daniel taking his turn on the front to really pull the group. And another OTR team working together, really pushing ahead with G. Jackson, really pushing that power to really push ahead and pull his teammates with him. Gaining ground on D. Miller here. And here we go, so that chase group is beginning to gain that ground. Still over 2 kilometers behind, but at least maintaining spots within the top 10 and working as a team to do so. Fantastic tactics, fantastic camaraderie, fantastic teamwork. Wonderful stuff there. So it looks like Igor Kopse is extending that breakaway again as we're maintaining through the somewhat relative flat here before the next climb. This one is going to be the between 4 and 6% climb. Still maintaining over threshold, as indicated by the yellow, almost sometimes an orange meter there beneath his name. W. Claus there pushing at peak output. beginning to aid at that breakaway. So we're seeing this almost like an elastic band, this breakaway that's been formed by Igor Kopse. And again, as we get into this somewhat aggressive climb, are we going to see Igor perhaps overextend? Seems to be holding stable between 5.3 and 5.6 watts per kilo. A consummate professional given his extensive and lengthy racing history in real-world leagues. So perhaps he knows exactly where he is, exactly where he needs to be physically, and is just going to keep this breakaway consistent. So we've seen Igor hold there really consistently on those wattage. W claws kind of surging and dipping, but eating away at that breakaway nonetheless. And again, this wonderful tracking helicopter shot provided by the maestro himself, the vision mixer that is Damon from ZMS Livestream. And we can see Damon there. Look at that awesome array, very impressive. As somebody with a film and TV production degree, I'm incredibly jealous. So this OTR chase group beginning to maybe dissipate a bit as their efforts are becoming a little bit maybe stretched out, if you will. Maybe getting a little bit fatigued is what I'm aiming to say. But this group working together as a team here, beginning to reform back into a pace line, with D Miller once again taking his turn on the front, holding around threshold right now. But I presume as they get into a flat and beginning to go into an uphill, we're going to see surges above. Hopefully teammates there can begin to catch onto the back of D Miller and G Jackson. American Espelio there is really beginning to push ahead and begin to pull these two riders, fellow teammates with him, to catch onto their colleagues there up ahead. So 5 kilometers left and Igor is still surging on the front. Perhaps even taking it a little bit easier now. Or has he begun to overextend? Time will tell. W claws there holding over threshold, shortly over threshold, maintaining that distance with Igor Kopse somewhat consistently. Anthony Dubray has fallen behind, as we can see there, but Keith H has eaten away a huge amount of that distance. Again, really showing his power as a climber. Maybe falling back a little bit now, but let's see what he can do, knowing that he's coming out of one of our final climbs here. Moving up to 4th place, so he certainly managed to push up within the top 10. Look at that, great work, Keith. Nice spike of power to really get up to the crest and crest over the top of the climb here, knowing that that speed can be maintained through the downhill. Good consistency on that power through the climb. And here we go, so we've got 3.5 kilometers remaining. And we've got Igor staying around about threshold, perhaps dropping a little bit. This is admittedly coming for a downhill. And as we flatten out here into the flat, into the kind of valley, if you will, what are we going to see? We're going to see him spike that power again and really try and hold out an endurance effort? Or is he confident in the lead he has opened up? Admittedly, at this point, W. Claus and Anthony Debray are going to have to push incredibly hard to not just eat that distance, but to surge ahead. And we can see Mr. Claus here keeping that distance with Igor Kopsey again fairly consistently, holding a very, very consistent power around about threshold and holding that around the 340 to 350 meter distance with that breakaway by Igor. Daniel there has, it seems unfortunately that OTR team has split up a little bit. Maybe riders have got a bit fatigued here, but Daniel certainly pushing ahead with other riders there from OTR, still rounding out the top 10 nonetheless. Tony Lake also pushing ahead, looking to catch up with fellow teammate just about 100 meters or so ahead of him. And seeing consistency still in that distance between Igor Kopsey and W. Claus. So yeah, Tony Lake here really pushing through, just cresting over that gentle hill we just crested to really get into a spot where he can get into being spun out perhaps for that downhill and just coast down with speed. And being able to maintain that as a consistency. Keith H holding on very firmly to that 4th place position and holding a very consistent distance between him and the lead. And again, at this point, I think he's looking to maintain his place at the 4th place position. D. Miller and G. Jackson, both UK riders for OTR, working together to pull each other along, and one would assume again using that tactic they've been using very consummately up until now, which is taking turns pulling, taking turns benefiting from the draft. Igor Kopsey there, so far ahead we can just get this fantastic aerial shot unobstructed by other riders. With just over a kilometre to go, I feel like this is quite confidently Igor Kopsey's race right now, but let's see what W. Claus can do in sprint. It's going to have to be a pretty impressive sprint. There we go, even dropping back to just maintaining that threshold, maybe just spiking a little tiny bit above threshold. But Igor Kopsey seems very confident in his lead place position right now. W. Claus dropping back a little bit. Even with confidently resting for 2nd place position, is he going to show us a nice surge of power for a nice finish line sprint? Regardless. So Igor Kopsey here closing into the last 300 meters. Here we go, we can get to see a little bit of a spike here, maybe doing a little sprint. Just to really assert a good time, maybe. There we go, look at that. Cresting from the horizon, becoming a reality, that finish line. Igor Kopse takes that confidently today. Just maintaining a good power there, W Claus looking at just keeping that second place position, which is certainly nothing to be sniffed at. A spike in power here, is this going to be the finish line sprint? There we go, we've got the big powered sprint here out of the saddle, one would assume in the real world, in the drops, and really just pushing through those crank arms. Good effort there, as it is from every rider here today. Anthony Debray again surging to maintain that third place position. Maintaining over threshold. There we go, also a sprint, also out of the saddle, and the same with his actual avatar animation. Out of the saddle in the drops, pushing through those crank arms, really getting a good finish time there. Keith H. Who, a wonderful climber, has to be said, is really pushing here for that finish line and just maintaining that fourth place placement. Fantastic effort from Keith today. Really ate up that gap and managed to push up to fourth. Very impressive chase effort. Certainly not easy when you're in chase mode, and you've got that tunnel vision, and you have to really work against your own physical effort. In matching GBR cycling or Team GB cycling kits here, we've got Jay Linden and Jay Samet. Coming in to round out the top 6 places that have crossed the finish line thus far. Tony Lake above threshold here, holding on to that 7th place position right now. Holding quite consistently over threshold. Are we going to see that big surge for the finish line sprint? That effort is certainly nothing to be sniffed at, and neither is that of M. Daniel that we're watching now. Holding consistently at threshold, maybe just a little bit below. Again, as you can see by the color-coded meter beneath M. Daniel's name. Team OTR looking to really round out the top 10 spots here. Those big surges for those sprints really coming into play. All right, so our top 10 has crossed the finish line. So what do our results look like? So for stage 3, we've got Igor Kopse, and he is at 47 minutes and 25 seconds. But everything so far, very impressive, very close in time. So that places Igor at 4.09. And then we have the top 5, only rounded out to about 3 minutes behind Igor. Considering how far Igor had surged ahead, very impressive chase efforts from everybody today. And then the top 10 going down to about 5 minutes behind. So again, great chase efforts, really closing that time and distance that formed. So we're seeing Igor there at the top with 4.09 and Gordon, the 10th place position of our top 10 at 3.14. So we'll really get to see what this has done to the results on the following Friday. So thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to host for you for the React e-cycling racing series right here on ZMS eSports. Thank you for joining us, and you can watch these live on the ZMS eSports Facebook page and YouTube channel, as well as the myriad of ways that you can watch ESTV live. My name's been Mark. Have a wonderful day.